What am I doing? Why am I still sitting here at this hour working on this? I said this is my fee. Then they pushed back and I folded. Again. I told myself it's just one compromise, just this once. But this is the third just this once in 2 weeks. By asking too little, I feel like a slave of my own business. I call myself my own boss, but my behavior says my clients are the boss. And beneath that, what it really says is, I'm afraid. Afraid that if I name my true worth, they'll leave. And what will that say about me? About my value? Money is never just money, especially not for those of us who are raised to work twice as hard for half the price. Asking too little becomes a mirror. It shows you exactly how much or how little you believe your presence is worth, and how easily you give away your power just to avoid being left. Last episode, we explored the fear of abandonment. That strangling sense that someone could leave and you might not survive it. But what if this entrepreneur dilemma is the same fear wearing different clothes? Not just afraid to lose a client, but afraid to lose recognition, afraid to lose safety, afraid to lose someone's yes. So I want to ask you something. Who is the boss in your life? Who is the boss in your relationship? Is it really you? Or is it your fear of being left? That fear of abandonment? If you keep lowering your price in business, in love, in how you let people treat you, are you really powerless? Or are you abandoning yourself before anyone else has the chance to? Welcome. My name is Indiana Mahoiï, your dating philosopher for this episode and one of the hosts of Dating Academy. This is where we question our patterns and think and feel out loud about love. This podcast isn't a list of dating tips. It's a space to ask deeper questions, to look at the architecture behind our reactions, and to see how love reveals our philosophy of life. I want to start today not with theory, but with a memory. I flew to London, barely 16 years old, for a position as an au pair. I knew no one. I had no local number, no Wi-Fi. I landed at Luton and was picked up by a driver sent by my landlady, my mother patron as I call her. I sat in the car in silence, watching unfamiliar roads. I remember staring at the glass and suddenly thinking, if no one knows where I am, do I even exist? It was my first real encounter with abandonment, not as drama, but as silence. The kind that presses on your chest and whispers, you are now alone. Can you live through this? Fear of abandonment, as we explored last time, is not just a psychological term. It's a bodily event. It contracts your breath. It coils your stomach. It teaches you to trade away your truth for the illusion of closeness. But if we dare to look it in the eye, fear becomes something else entirely. Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom, a moment where anything could happen and where you must choose what kind of self to become. So today, we follow that question one step further. If we speak of the fear of abandonment, then philosophy almost demands we ask, what about the power of abandonment? The question we carry with us is this. Is power in relationships a tool of self-respect or an instrument of control? In self-help and business circles, there's a phrase that shows up like a mantra. Walk away power. You are powerful, they say, when you're always ready to leave, when you can say no with ease, when you don't need the deal, the client, the lover. William Ury, in The Power of a Positive No, reminds us that true power lies in having a plan B. That when you're not desperate, you can stay in your values. Stephen Covey in The 7 Habits echoes it. Real self-worth comes from within, not from being liked or treated well. And then there's Donald Trump in The Art of the Deal, who put it even more bluntly. I don't do it for the money. Deals are my art form. The other becomes material, a pawn, a piece on the board. This brings us to one of my favorite thinkers, Immanuel Kant. Not always easy reading, but razor sharp. He gave us the second formulation of the categorical imperative. Never treat the other merely as a means, but always also as an end. In other words, don't reduce people to what they can do for you or how they can validate you. If walkaway power becomes a strategy to manipulate, then it breaks the ethical core of relationship itself. If you want to get your feet wet with further insights into the work and philosophical legacy of Kant, especially in relation to life, love, and dating, please check the link on your screen now. These strategies may work in business, but what happens when we import them into love? What happens when you treat your partner like a deal who disappears? And who do you become? Are you becoming free? Or just training yourself to care less? Because instrumental success is not the same as spiritual enlightenment or even philosophical soundness. You can win the game, but still lose your soul. And yet, Kant is not the whole story. Because behind every ethical theory, there's a human standing somewhere, trembling, wanting something, risking something. That's where existentialism walks in. Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Sartre. They didn't give us rules. They gave us mirrors. And their mirror shows this. Every act of abandonment is a revelation of freedom. And every freedom is also a burden. Sartre, for instance, said, hell is other people. But he didn't mean people are bad. He meant a gaze can imprison us. We become what they see. We forget who we are when they're not looking. And Nietzsche, he saw how easily victimhood becomes a power play. He called it slave morality, where we condemn others not from strength, but from ressentiment. Check the links on your screen now for the episodes where we feature the work and life of Nietzsche and Sartre in relation to relationships and dating. And before Sartre, Nietzsche, and Kierkegaard, there was Hegel, the philosopher we will feature in this episode today. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was born in 1770 in Stuttgart, Germany, to a civil servant father and a deeply religious mother. He studied theology at the Tübinger Stift, where he formed close intellectual friendships with Friedrich Hölderlin and Friedrich Schelling. Hegel died of cholera in 1831 in Berlin. As Hegel watched the French Revolution tear apart the old world, he did not see that as just a series of disastrous events. For him, it was also a clear sign of the dawn of the full manifestation of Geist. But he also philosophized, how can the individual spirit become free? Not in theory, but in lived, embodied experience. Hegel famously developed the master-slave dialectic, not a literal tale of two figures, but a profound philosophical analysis of the power dynamics between two people. It reveals the nature of domination and dependence, and how both master and slave are bound in a mutual, often invisible need for recognition. The master wins the fight, but becomes dependent on the recognition of someone he doesn't truly respect. The slave submits, but through labor, discipline, and fear, he slowly transforms himself. Hegel's twist? The real freedom lies not with the master, but with the slave. And isn't that what many of us are doing in love? Submitting not out of alignment, but for straps of recognition. And yet, inside that fear, something is growing. Some quiet dignity. Some secret edge of becoming. We like to think of philosophers as minds on paper, but they were also bodies in the world, and Hegel lived the questions he wrote. For example, Hegel had an affair with his housemaid Christiane Burckhardt, a working-class woman in Jena. She bore his son. He recognized the child, but Hegel never married her. The class difference may have been a gap too wide for him to bridge. We find another illustration from his personal life that may have inspired him to write about the master-slave dialectic. Before Hegel became the celebrated philosopher, he had no security. He was financially vulnerable. In many ways, he was a slave of his own work, dependent, striving, unrecognized. Later, he wed a noble woman, but what stayed was the asymmetry in dominance and dependence. The longing for recognition across class, across desire. So let me ask you something now. Where in your work do you feel more like the underdog rather than the owner of your own time? Where in your romantic life do you feel like a Hegelian slave, in need of someone's attention or approval? And if you're very honest, in which relationship is someone actually your master? Not legally, but in your heart. Let's now consider the power of abandonment. Power is not good or bad. It's not one thing. It's a neutral force. How it lands depends on the intent. When used destructively, it becomes control, threats, withdrawal, the silent treatment. You walk out not to protect yourself, but to make the other squirm. When applied with consciousness and benevolent intent, on the other hand, that power may serve the true purpose of one's soul. This is the positive application of the power of abandonment. Power is not used as a weapon, but as a whisper of self-respect. And it begins by spreading your worth, not investing all of it in one person, one job, one yes. Imagine your self-esteem as a portfolio. If you put 100% in one stock, any drop will destroy you. But if your identity is diversified, you can lose something and still remain. You can say goodbye and not disappear. You can be left and not abandon yourself. So here are 3 small places to begin. First, take back one prize moment. One place where you always fold. This week, try saying, I'd like to do this specific one thing differently. Even one sentence can break a hidden slave pattern. Second, break the silence. Choose one thing you never dare to say. But this time, just say it, simply. But not as a covert reproach, just to stop the erosion, to reclaim your voice. And thirdly, begin diversifying your worth. Ask yourself, where do I get my sense of value? If it all rests in one person, one role, one source, choose just one more. Feed that source this week. Because in the end, the goal is not to become the new master, not to flip the power, but to stop being a slave to your own fear. Most relationships don't fall apart because one person has the say. They fall apart because the other person stops having a say at all. The problem is not that one voice is strong. It's that the other voice goes quiet. So today, I invite you. Don't aim to dominate. Don't aim to win. Just find one small moment where you stop abandoning yourself. That's where the power of abandonment changes, from a weapon of control into a quiet inner option to stand with yourself. Thank you for being here, for listening, for reflecting. If this sparks something in you, share your thoughts in the comments, or even better, speak it to someone who matters. Please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe the channel. I do not want to miss your listening next time. This is Indiana Mahoiï for Dating Academy, and I love to see you in the next episode. Until then, keep asking, keep sharing.